So now, since we are done with our PCs, we are done with our networking, we are moving on to laptops and other mobile devices. Okay, so we are on chapter 7. So we're about halfway through our preparation for the A+. And like I mentioned this morning, we're at that point now. We're on that downhill, about 8-9 weeks left, and because you have spring break in there and the last week, not a lot gets done. So there's not a ton of time if you're going for your A+ for you to study. Now you guys are juniors, so you can just take a single A+ test this year, and then at the beginning of next year, take that second one. Don't feel like you have to do both of those tests, right? If you feel like you're ready for them, you take practice tests for them. You could get certified. Cool, then do that. And then next year you could focus on more of your security stuff. But you do have to start kind of taking ownership in your test prep. So this is a very long chapter. It is 12 slides. So we're going to break this up into multiple days. Today is going to be one of those longer days, just so we can get through as much content as possible. And then tomorrow we're going to do some lab stuff. I have a bunch of Android devices, some iOS devices that I've cleared off for you guys to mess around with. So you guys will be able to get hands-on with those things. So our goals are to be able to describe, what makes a laptop, mobile device, a mobile device. Talking about what are some of the common things that you'll have to set on a laptop? Power settings, wireless, stuff like that. Stuff that you have probably, because you guys are more digital native in that you've grown up with this stuff, this should kind of come as second nature. But going through and kind of talking through the business side of why some of this stuff is important. Talk about installing some memory on laptops and other, exchanging different hardware components on mobile devices, and kind of talk about some of that troubleshooting when it comes to those devices. From there, we are going to talk a little bit about, network, how to set up different applications like email, going through and saying, how can we prevent, obviously, our job tends to be a lot of reactive in that, we're responding to help desk tickets because something's broke, or we're getting phone calls because, oh, I can't do XYZ and it needs to be done right now. It is the most important issue right now. And then you get there and it was like a coloring page that they wanted to use for next week. Okay. When in reality, there's someone that's actually having an issue that's over there just trying to solve it because they don't want to bother you. So the more that we can be preventative with some of those things, that we can put things in place ahead of time, the less work in the long run that we're going to have. And then we're going to talk about that basic troubleshooting process that we've gone over pretty much every single module. Why do you think we're going to go over it every single module? Yeah, so that troubleshooting thing is going to be throughout the exam, throughout different sections. So it could be in the laptops or mobile devices. It could be in the networking. The problem that they present to you might be a network issue that you still have to follow through that with that troubleshooting process. Okay. So characteristics of laptops and mobile devices. Over the last few years, we're seeing the rise of kind of the mobile device first society, right? So my wife and I were down in Columbus this weekend, and we went to the Amazon, Amazon Style, I think is what they call it, is the brand. The Amazon Style store, okay? So if you don't know, Columbus is one of the meccas when it comes to fashion, and it's not what a lot of people think of. They think of like New York Fashion Week, or they think of like Hollywood, California. The amount of fashion that happens in Columbus is, I want to say they're number 2, maybe number 1 when it comes to fashion, and especially with like different fashion brands. So L Brands was started there, which is like your Victoria's Secrets. What is it? Not Hollister, maybe American Eagle, Bath and Body. Like a lot of those brands that you see in malls all across the United States are based out of Columbus. So Amazon, they're kind of the online web company. Why, having a store is kind of weird. But what they're doing is they're testing a market that is ripe for fashion. And because they are a tech company, it was full of really, really cool technology. So your shopping experience is based around your mobile device, okay? So when you walk in the door, you look around and it's like, okay, so do they just ship this stuff to your house? Like it'll beat you home? How does this work? And it turns out as you're shopping, you like the style, and then to try it on, you just add it to your room. So you go through, do your shopping, the couple things that you want to try, and then you get a push notification that says your room's ready. You literally walk in. You're not like carrying all these clothes around. You literally walk into the dressing room, and all of your stuff is there. So then you can try it on. They have suggestions. There's a monitor in there. And then when you go to check out, you check out right from your mobile device and you leave. Okay? So this idea of managing mobile devices is not going to go away. So it's up to you guys as kind of our next generation of IT specialists or cybersecurity specialists. You have to secure these devices just as much as you have to manage them. Okay? So these things aren't going away. So anymore, your time is going to be more spent on mobile devices such as Chromebooks, laptops, tablet devices than it will be with your traditional desktops. Okay, desktops are great to learn on because it's a little bit bigger, so you could see all the different pieces. But in the long run, you're most likely going to be managing probably like 80-20 when it comes to mobile devices versus standard PCs. I don't think we have to explain kind of what a mobile device is. We all carry them, but as a point of reference, they are self-contained power. They have batteries that are in them, small and lightweight, and they don't necessarily need anything else to exist, right? Even like the keyboard, it's on screen, or you interact in some way with that touch screen. Laptops do have a actual keyboard, and that's that kind of distinguishing factor between like a tablet and a laptop is the fact that it does have a built-in keyboard. So again, laptops, they're going to be small and portable. They're going to run Windows, they're going to run Linux, they're going to run Mac OS. This slide I want to point out is wrong. They don't run iOS, they run Mac OS, okay? So as you're going through the slides, just make note of that. That is an error. It's Mac OS. Another thing, too, built into the devices, being that they are self-contained, they have all your wireless that's needed. They have Bluetooth. They have audio support, speakers. You interact with a touchpad instead of having an actual mouse. But that's not to say that you have to only interact with the device through the touchpad or just through the touch screen. You can use other external devices. So you can see here, I'm using a microphone, I'm using a mouse, and I'm connected to a big screen, even though I am on a laptop. Yeah. Yeah, so that's something that I got into a little bit when I was deployed because I didn't have the luxury, or sometimes at night I didn't feel like setting up my console and a TV. I ended up purchasing, I started off with just a controller, like in a little mount, but then I ended up purchasing the, I forget which one it is, but it like the Razer thing that your phone goes in. And just, it's so cool to see like where, like even mobile gaming, where it started with like the PSP was like the first thing that I remember where you could actually have like a first person shooter on the go with like SOCOM. Well, I guess that was more like third person, but where you could actually have that level of gameplay till fast forward now with the mobile, just the amount of gaming that you can do on these mobile devices. Yeah.
There are also some phones that have touch sensitive triggers on the sides
Oh, really?
that activate when you start playing the game.
Oh, so it's specifically like made for it.
If you turn it and you're playing like Call of Duty, there will be like touch sensitive bumpers that you can use.
Oh, that's pretty cool. So just it's like almost like a touchpad type of thing. Yeah. A couple things too to keep in mind when purchasing a laptop is the amount of ports that you need or the specific user needs. I was having a discussion with one of the seniors earlier about the laptop that he was going to purchase, and it's tough because there's no perfect device. Okay, you're gonna give up something somewhere. If you want more ports, unfortunately, it's not going to be as thin. Or you might have specific ports that you need that also change, the size and whatnot. So he ended up looking at one that had a smart card reader, a network port, and there was like one other thing. And he found like those. He just determined that was more important than maybe a nicer screen or maybe a nicer keyboard, because that's what's important. So when you're working with your users, when it comes to, because a lot of times you guys are going to be responsible for making purchases or making suggestions for purchases. So make sure that The device that you purchase is what the user needs and not necessarily what would fit best in your network. Okay. You are not your customer. Okay. That's one thing that in business that I learned very quickly, but that goes over to IT as well, is you're not the person that's going to be using this computer every day. So if the user wants something specific and it's within the budget, then get what they want, what they're more comfortable with, because they're going to be spending hours on this device every day. Okay. So when it comes to smartphones, and it'll be interesting to see how this changes too. So what are your guys' thoughts on app stores having like a 30% tax for developers? What do you guys think? So if you don't know, so Apple and Google both charge developers 30% of their sales in order to exist in their ecosystem. Okay. Now with Android, there are other app stores that you can go to, so it's not as monopolistic. But with Apple, you have to, there's no side loading of apps unless you jailbreak. So, you have to go through their app store. Yeah.
Wasn't Fortnite removed because they wouldn't give Apple the percentages of their in-game purchases?
Correct. So they kind of built a workaround, and Apple said, nah, like that ain't for us. So that's why it ended up getting pulled from the App Store. I don't know now, today, is it still pulled from the App Store?
I don't think it's in there.
It's not on iOS or on iPhone anymore. Yeah. So that, I mean, is that a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Like, should there be change for that? You don't care? Yeah. It doesn't affect you.
I don't think it should be changed.
You don't think the 30% is good?
Well, yeah, because although I do feel like there should be more than one option to purchase.
Sure.
There
Having
is
more
a
app
difference
stores.
between the two. Like I know Google, yes, Apple, yeah, they charge you, but they need to keep their side up somehow too.
Correct. And there's a lot of things that go into play, right? I mean, they have to, how many devices are updating through the App Store, and they're holding all this data and having to pay to, for these transactions, right? There's still credit card fees. There's still other things that go into that. Is it tougher for us, a beginning developer? Yeah. But when we had apps in the App Store that we charged for, we just kind of took that into consideration. Like Apple provides, I say Apple just because I haven't done really any Android development. Apple provides such a wealth of tools for its developers that, like myself as a developer who has had stuff in the App Store, I found tremendous value in that 30%. Like we got our money's worth. Now it might be different for larger companies, where we're talking about millions instead of thousands in our case. So, for us it was worth it, but maybe bigger companies it's not. So yeah, so with Apple, I guess just picking up where we left off, Android has a couple different options. I know Amazon has like an app store. Obviously Google has their own Play Store. I'm sure there's other ones. You can even just download APKs. Not that that's necessarily the safest thing to do, but it is possible where you can just download the APKs and then install them to kind of sideload them. Anymore, these are becoming the main way that we interact with the world around us. Even to the point where businesses can take credit cards with them, which we've been able to do for a while, but without any extra devices. Okay, we don't have to have credit card readers anymore. We don't have to put like readers in there where we swipe. You can literally use the built-in chips on mobile devices in order to accept credit cards, which is really, really cool, especially if you want to start your own small business. Another thing that's included in smartphones that you need to be aware of is GPS location. And what's really cool with the latest iPhones is they're using that GPS signal or that GPS chip for things like SOS. So if you have no cell signal, you're able to still, like if you're in an emergency situation, like I always want to like it's same thing like with GoPros. Like I love buying GoPros because I want to like do extreme stuff. But then I never use GoPros because I'm just not that extreme. Yeah, until they overheat. And then the other thing is like with SOS, I'm like, well, what if I'm like climbing a mountain and I don't have cell phone service? Like I need to have this feature. And then I realize I don't climb mountains, but it's still really cool. Like, so for the people that do climb said mountains or, and even here, like if there was an emergency and, we didn't have cell phone service, we could still rely on other technologies in order to get a message out. So that's like a cool kind of, even in the last 6 months to a year, kind of a growth that we've seen in that. Before, it was just to be like turn-by-turn directions. And if you look at the phone too, I mean, you could probably make a list of 100 things that it's replaced in our lives, right? How many people carry around flashlights? Not that a lot of people did before, but it's nice to have one now, right?
My cousins do.
Still carry around flashlights?
They have like a full EDC.
Oh, yeah. I mean, if it's in
not
like a kit.
multi-tools wallet phone.
Yeah. But like for the general purpose, like we don't do that. Same thing with calculators. Same thing. What's that? You don't have to have a hammer now because you use your phone as a hammer. Not recommended at all. GPSs, like we used to have TomTom and Garmin GPSs that you would every year pay for a map update, and it would be a pain in the butt to go through and like upgrade it. Right? That's been replaced. Web browsers, laptops. I mean, there's so many things that have been replaced by our cell phones. So one thing that you really, really need to be cognizant of when it comes to GPS is GPS coordinates, okay? Just before the lecture started, we were going through photos of New York City. Like, it was super convenient for me to be able to go into Google Photos, type in New York City, and then I saw my New York City photos, right? It's because that GPS data was written into those photos. But what is the downside of that? Yeah. What's that? It doesn't really take up much storage because it's in the metadata, so you wouldn't really notice it in the storage side.
If there's a picture of a private location that got out, like the raw file got out, somebody could find that location, home address.
Absolutely. So, and that's one thing that we're kind of trained on in the military is to be cognizant of that. There was an issue with, there was, I want to say it was in Iraq or Afghanistan. I don't remember which one, but there was a half marathon. And a lot of people used fitness trackers and used their phones in order to track their route. What did that do? What did that tell the enemy? Where the bases were. They basically mapped it for them because then they put that out on the public internet. Okay, because it was just in the Garmin app. They saw the results. You could click on it. I actually went through. She was prior service, and she was coming back. She was in the Air Force, but she was actually one of those runners that did that, and she was proud of it for some reason. I don't understand, but here nor there. So that, it's not something that they did intentional, right? It's the same thing when you're on vacation and posting photos. You're basically telling people that you're away from home, and they can look at your previous photos and they could see where you live, right? Especially as more and more people share photos inside their homes, out in front of their homes, that information can still be part of that file.
There's a lot of location metadata and that type of general stuff. What type of phone you took it on, and when, where. There's a lot of stuff that's like kept in the image file. That's
Yeah.
a lot of the time deleted before you send it, but it's still out there when you share it.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's not just like looking at the picture and saying, I recognize that place, or trying to map it out or spending a while doing that. It's a lot of the time just plainly printed in the file itself.
Absolutely. And that's one thing that once you get into cyber, you're doing what's called OSINT, or open source intelligence gathering, where you utilize that information and you're able to see where things are located, to come up with passwords, or there could be something embedded in that file that could give you that piece of information. So just be cognizant of that. Also, it can be helpful too. If you need to timestamp something. For example, I forgot my badge the other day. I took a selfie when I walked out of the building, and I had a time, date, and GPS in that photo. So if they ever had an issue with, oh, you didn't clock out that day, you didn't badge out that day, I had that photo, and I used it. On that next Monday, I went in there and I said, hey, I have a photo. They're like, oh, that's a really good idea. So again, those things can be very useful as well.
Google keeps a log of where you are at all times.
Pretty much.
It's in Google Maps. Like,
Oh, yeah, if you have it
I use
on.
that for my work when I forget to write down my times.
Mhm.
Like, you don't even have to turn it on the phone. Maybe it defaults.
No, you don't have to turn it on. I can tell you this because I get a trip location every end of the month. I get everywhere I've been that month.
Yeah, creepy.
My timeline right here, and it's just everywhere I've been today, yesterday, for years.
Yeah, I believe I disabled that back in the day, but maybe I didn't. What else? Tethering. Do you guys know what tethering is? Those of you that are still awake. Yeah, so your mobile hotspot, right? So it allows you to connect your larger mobile devices to like laptops and stuff like that through your phone to get access to that cellular network. Tablets and e-readers. Tablets are like your iPhone or your iPads, your Android tablets, and then e-readers. They're just kind of more of a, I would say, like more of a specific device. So Kindles, for example, they're pretty much the. I think Nooks are still around through Barnes and Noble, but it's really Kindle is the like go-to when it comes to e-readers, and even they're branching out. I mean, they are full-on Android tablets for any of the Fire series, and even their latest one allows you to kind of take notes on the screen. So it's becoming less of a singular device and more of a multi-purpose device. But they're really, really good at that one thing, right? They're really good at reading books. Are they great at browsing the web? No, because they're using a technology known as e-ink. So it's just black and white, and it's just refreshing. Battery life's amazing. Are you going to be running any games on it? No, you're not. So when it comes to those more specific devices, they do usually just one thing really, really well. Some of them do. Also, back in the day, they did. I haven't looked at Kindles recently, but they actually used to come with free cell service. Why do you think that is? Yeah, so it was a really cool feature if you were someone that was an avid book reader that you could just spend more money with Amazon, right? And also, are these book files very large? They're not. They're not at all. So the amount of usage that you had was very small. So it was a very small investment on Amazon's part. So there was some things that came out that you could like tether devices through to get free internet, but I think most of those have been shut down. And it's worth noting that e-readers have a much longer battery life because they don't have those big, colorful screens. Wearables. How many of you guys have smartwatches or smart devices on? 1, 2, 3. Myself 4. So again, and that's just a sample size in high school. So the rest of the world, it's even more, right? You see smartwatches and smart devices all over the place. And what they're doing, it really depends on what you want it to do as a user. So early on, I was whether it was Android or iOS, I was very much like very interactive and all my text messages and all of that. And then as I got more into fitness, more specifically distance running, I invested in a specific watch that was the best for that. So do I get all my text messages and stuff? No, I turn that off. Like to me, it's a distraction. I'm not saying it's a problem for others, like other people like that. But for me, it was a distraction. So I want a watch that does a really good job of giving me data about my runs so I can improve as a runner. So again, that's why I chose, the Garmin's or what worked for me. Others like the Fitbits, or they like the Apple Watches, or any of the Android options, Samsung options. But again, it all depends on what you want to get out of that device. There's not going to be one perfect device for absolutely everyone. Also, people tend to be just obsessed with data. That's where like the fitness trackers really come in, is being able to see how many steps they have, or having that kind of inspiration on their wrist to kind of keep them going to hit their weight loss goals that they might have. You could also load music on them, and that was one feature that I will probably upgrade to. I kind of wanted to test the Garmin before I spent like a bunch of money on it, but the upgraded version of this does allow you to even save music to it too. So again, like as a runner going out on 10-15 mile runs, to not have to carry a phone, to carry the least amount as possible. I mean, not carrying my phone means I have more room for water or nutrition, or just being lighter weight. So it would be so nice just to be able to have all that on my watch with just my headphones paired to the watch, so I could just go. What else? And just every day we're seeing more and more things that are used, especially in like the healthcare side. The data getting to doctors to help making better diagnoses for those people that might have maybe heart issues or breathing issues or whatever, reporting that they could do from the smart devices. So next year you guys will have one of these. I put a request in. But VR. Who here has done VR before? Virtual reality. I know your brother, like he bought like the Steam. He had the Steam one, and then I think he returned it, didn't he?
Yeah.
He had like what's the name of the Steam one? What is it? Valve Index. Yeah, that's the one that he had went with. I only have used the Oculus and the Oculus that like plugged into. I think it was Oculus that plugged into the computer, like two different ones. But yeah,
The high school is a VR cart. Actually, I think two of them.
that sounds pretty cool. We had Google when I was at New London. We had Google come out. It was for Google Cardboard, which is just kind of a funny way of doing it, I guess. But yeah, they came out to do some field trips and stuff like that, where you could do like VR field trips and actually like look around. And the first time you do it, it's a pretty. If you haven't done it, like definitely, um, we'll have the VR headsets here next year just for you to like understand how the technology works and in your field like how you can use it. But it is a super immersive experience, especially for someone that's never done it before. It's really neat. And I know in on the military side of things, the Army just purchased quite a bit of VR and augmented reality in order to train for missions. So that way, soldiers could be safer. So taking intel that we've received and kind of rebuilding some of those bases or some of those targets, and to be able to go through and actually practice those things before they go into a mission, just helps them be more efficient and safer as well. So, and the cool thing is, like, they can run several different scenarios on where people are. So again, you're training that soldier on, even if it's someone coming in from the left versus coming in from the right, they have, when they get into that actual situation, they've not maybe planned for everything, but they've planned for so much more than before. We used to get like a map, maybe some photos. Now it's a full-on immersive environment. So last I heard, the project, like, they did the purchases and they started getting them, but I think it was paused. It might have been because of like a motion sickness thing. I don't remember exactly why, but it might be paused currently. I'm not sure. Okay, so we are going to take a break there. I'll pop this lab in there for you guys, where it's just doing some research on Android, iOS, kind of what the latest things are, and then just talk. What we're going to do is we're going to go around the room and talk about the device that you chose, and then there are some videos in there in the actual Cisco modules in order to kind of go over some of the things that we talked about today. So tomorrow we're going to pick it up with actual components in laptops. So, any questions before we finish up for the day?